The high society of Apollodina's capital was suddenly buzzing with rumors. The source? None other than the emperor's own sister, Grand Duchess Rosalind Idris Appledon. She'd always been a bit of an oddball, ditching tea parties for hanging with the knights. At some point, Rosalind traded dresses for pants and started swaggering around with a sword. The upper crust were whisperin' that a noble duchess shouldn't be keepin' those kinds of companions. And this one's supposedly wild, scary, looks like some kind of beast. There's gotta be more to it. Everyone wanted to see if it was true, so one of the guys announces the princess's birthday is coming up. There's gonna be a ball at the Imperial Palace, and he suggests everyone puts on their best behavior. Because the Grand Duchess herself, who's usually hard to catch, will actually be there. Finally, the day of the ball arrives, and everyone raises their glasses, wishing the princess a happy birthday. Hear ye, announcing the arrival of Grand Duchess Rosalind Idris Appledon. All eyes in the room snap towards the entrance of the grand hall. The nobles are stunned by how much skin the Duchess is showing off. They start whispering when they see the guy with Rosalind. Nobody's ever seen him before. Rumor has it the Duchess's lover is a slave, but this dude's got no piercings and no tail. The guests are trying to figure out who this guy is, and some are still saying he's the slave. These high society types can't believe the Duchess would actually bring him to the ball. The guy whispers to Rosalind, "Try not to even think about smiling." But she figures she can do whatever she wants in her own head, and she ain't interested in guys who try to control her. The heroine tells her companion to hang tight while she says hello to His Majesty. Since Fenrir doesn't even want to hang with her, she tells him to hit the balcony if he's trying to avoid people. Rosalind promises to be back soon and tells him to draw the curtains so no one follows him, 'cause that's apparently what everyone does. Promising to see him again soon, the girl leaves, leaving the guy in the middle of the hall. After she leaves, everyone's attitude towards Fenrir takes a total nosedive. Since reality's wearing him down more than he thought possible, the guy heads out to the balcony, just like Rosalind said. He pulls the curtain shut behind him, and finally, he can breathe easy. Rosalind was sure everyone would be on their best behavior at the ball, what with the princess's birthday and all. But according to her, on a normal day, people are always hiding in the garden, getting up to no good. While she was telling him this, she pinched his neck hard, and now he's rubbing the bruise. Just then, some little girl shows up on the balcony, wondering what he's got in his hand. Fenrir whips around, clearly thrown by the kid suddenly showing up here. The little girl asks the guy if she can try some of his drink. When he says no, she pouts those chubby lips and gives him a hurt look. He can't take the stare, so Fenrir hands over the glass, but the kid makes a face at the nasty, bitter taste after she sips it. Just then, her nanny rushes onto the balcony, and that's when the guy realizes he's looking at a princess. The maid scolds the girl for drinking something from a stranger. Turns out, the princess thought Fenrir was a prince from some faraway land and figured his drink would be something special. Her Highness totally got the wrong idea, but the nanny doesn't even let him explain and just hauls her off the balcony. Sitting in the maid's arms, the princess waves to Fenrir and says goodbye. The blue bloods who overheard everything instantly start spreading the rumor that the Duchess's companion is a prince from a distant kingdom. Fenrir's clutching his head, totally stressed by all this mess, when Rosalind walks up to him. She asks him what he thinks of her niece Melody, and admits that she's the one who started the rumor in the first place. Everyone kept asking the Duchess about Fenrir, so she said he's a prince who fled from a faraway land after getting framed during a power struggle. Supposedly, the prince made it to Apollodina to escape his pursuers. Rosalind told everyone Fenrir's planning to take out his uncle, start a rebellion, and reclaim his throne, and that she's helping him. She's supposedly planning to fight in the war in disguise, because if her identity gets exposed, it'll reveal the Empire's involvement. Fenrir's floored by what he's hearing and can't figure out when Rosalind even came up with all this. Rosalind can see what he's worried about just by looking at him, but she tells him not to sweat it and gives him a hug. Rosalind's niece is pretty sharp. She won't actually believe Fenrir's a real prince, she just likes to play pretend. Still, Fenrir thinks if Melody finds out he's a slave, she's gonna be bummed. Rosalind doesn't see it that way. Her niece is a lot like her in terms of personality. Hugging Fenrir, she reminds him that he wasn't always a slave. After saying that, the Duchess kisses him on the lips, and the guy gets embarrassed because everyone's watching. But Rosalind doesn't care. She's sure all these people are just jealous of her anyway. Now that the Duchess has greeted the Emperor, her business here is done, so they can head home. The girl's in the bedroom and there's a panther lying on the floor, and she apologizes to the beast for waking him up. The heroine gets into bed, and Fenrir, having turned back into a human, jumps in with her. Rosalind pulls him close and suggests they sleep cuddled up. Wishing the guy good night, she strokes his scarred back and remembers their first meeting. In the capital city sits the Green Estate, which has the richest history of all the imperial family's mansions. It looks like some ancient castle straight out of a fairy tale, towering over the green forest like that. People stop by all the time, but nobody ever really lived here. This place belonged only to the emperor for ages. Nobody else owned it, except for one person, Rosalind Appledon. Right then, the maid comes in to see the Duchess and offers her some tea, 'cause she's got a killer headache. The heroine refuses to call a doctor, figures she just didn't get enough sleep. The butler walks in and announces that Lady Elon's arrived and is asking for an audience with the Duchess. She gave notice of her visit today and showed up right away, wanting to hand something over to Rosalind. Lady Elon, who is waiting for the Duchess in the parlor, jumps up all happy when she sees her. The girls hug and exchange pleasantries, stoked to see each other. Elon asks Rosalind to take her gift already and points to a cage standing a little ways off. She's super stoked, says she's been too hyped to sleep for days. The second she saw him at the auction, she thought of Rosalind, so she immediately bid high and won. Elon didn't wrap the gift, but what's in the box is way more important. As she orders the servants to open the gift, our girl gets a really bad feeling. Elon says if you take good care of him, he'll definitely be worth what she paid. Rosalind is stunned because the girl brought her a slave as a gift, bought at auction. She says if you train him right, he can take on 3 trained knights, perfect bodyguard material. Our girl's like, how can that kid be a bodyguard? But Elon insists they grow fast, and in just 2 years, he'll be a young man. She whispers in Rosalind's ear that grown-up slaves are already used goods, if you catch my drift. You gotta break 'em while they're still young, see? If you don't do it early, there's no way you can use 'em as a subordinate. 'Cause an adult slave who doesn't love their master ain't gonna serve loyally, they only blindly follow their partner. So you gotta grab the young ones and use the quickest, easiest method, mind-altering drugs. This kid's got a blindfold, a gag, his hands are shackled, and they brought him in a crate. The heroine's wondering if he even realizes what's happening, and she's already thinking of rejecting Elon. But then she checks the time and gets ready to bounce. The trip here took forever. Saying she's got another meeting and no time to chat, Lady Elon heads for the door. Stopping at the doorway, she wishes Rosalind good luck and says a quick goodbye. The butler asks the Duchess what she wants done with this gift. Slavery might be legal in this empire, but just because something can be done doesn't make it right. Rosalind tells the maid to bring her wine instead of tea. As the maid rushes off, the butler suggests the Duchess send the gift back if it's too much trouble. The girl sighs, knowing that even if she did send it back, she couldn't do it looking like this. First, she orders the slave washed and put in a bed, that awful crate tossed out, and then for Nora to be summoned. Eleanor Greenwood informs the Duchess she's examined the patient and done what she could, and Rosalind thanks her. She says the wounds will heal in a few days. Slaves recover incredibly fast. The scars are permanent because the same spots have been cut and scarred hundreds of times. Eleanor is one of the few aristocrats who went to the academy. Now she's a doctor and cares for slaves. Rosalind has never dealt with injuries like these, so she wouldn't have known where to start. She admits to Nora that she initially wanted to send him back, and seeing the outrage on her face asks her to hear her out. The Duchess changed her mind, because if she did that, he'd remain a slave and be treated even worse than before. Once he recovers a bit, she plans to let him go and tell Elon that he ran away. However, according to Eleanor, there might not be any place where he lived before, or where he even wants to go back to. The fact that he was caught means his home was likely taken over, and returning there would be like handing himself over to the slavers. Maybe he never even had a homeland or a home to begin with. He could have been born into a family of slaves, and in that case, he has nowhere to return. Whatever the circumstances, the moment he's out on the streets, he'll be caught again and sold back into slavery. When Rosalind asks what she should do then, since she can't just leave him here, Eleanor doesn't understand why not. According to the Duchess, the boy is still very young, and she herself isn't old enough to be a parent to him. Eleanor understands the girl's concern, but then suddenly declares that the slave isn't a child at all. She says, even though he looks like a kid, he's got to be at least 20. The heroine stares in disbelief at the little guy curled up on the bed, totally not buying it. Nora says that once he finds his partner and comes into his own, he'll look like a regular dude. Then he can leave without getting snatched up again. Rosalind's surprised he can even fully shift into human form. Captives, no matter their age, usually have animal ears, tails, or some other physical quirk. Of course, not all of them do, but it's possible in this case because this kid's from the Karen tribe. They're super rare, especially with dark skin, and even Eleanor barely knows anything about them. Most slavers think dark skin is a mutation, so these types don't sell well. Nora knows how Ilona's eyes light up when she finds something rare, and she'd drop any amount of cash for something like this. Either way, she's adamant they can't let the slave go right now. Eleanor's convinced that if he wasn't bothering Rosalind, she would have kicked him out the second she got him. After all, the Duchess of Appledon gets rid of anything that could cause her trouble right away. Eleanor refuses to stay at the estate for even one more night, so our girl's seeing her off since it's already late. Tomorrow, the woman needs to see a patient, and after that, she'll try to find people who can protect and take in this slave. If it were up to her, she'd take him in herself, but Eleanor's got no room left. According to the Duchess, Nora should have said yes when she offered her a new home. The woman gets into the carriage and says with a laugh that Rosalind should make her that offer again in 6 months. She asks to be called as soon as the slave wakes up, promising to come right away. Rosalind sits by the sick man's bedside and strokes his brow, which is covered in sweat. She remembers Nora's story, according to which there used to be quite a few Karens, like 70 years ago. For some reason, they were hunted down, and their numbers were cut in half. Rumors started flying about the Karen's abilities, but they turned out to be bogus. Eleanor was weirdly reluctant to say exactly what those abilities were supposed to be. The only thing for sure was that the Karens paid with their lives for some gossip. A new day dawned at the estate, and our girl's surprised by what happened, 'cause she was sure the slave was out cold. He trashed the whole room, smashed vases, and clawed up the furniture. Even a maid got hurt. Now the slave's perched on top of the tallest dresser, growling down at everyone. As soon as Rosalind heard he was awake, she rushed over here, not even finishing her meal. When asked what happened, the butler said he brought the slave some broth, just like Eleanor suggested. But he bared his teeth the second the guy got close and didn't even look at the food. The heroine wants to know if the butler even tried talking to him. I mean, he's not a baby, he's gotta be able to talk. But the guy's not so sure, 'cause the kid just snarls at you the second you say anything. Rosalind walks up to the wardrobe and says in a firm voice, "Slave, get down from there, now!" He just snarls and hisses back, so the guards rush in to help the girl. The Duchess stops them, annoyed, saying, "How many people have been suffering all morning because of one kid?" Giving him a stern look, she says, "I don't usually give second chances, but considering what you've been through, I'll give you another shot." The girl explains, "The servants weren't trying to hurt you, they just wanted to give you some food. Even though I'm in charge here, I'm not going to keep you like a slave. I even called a doctor to heal your wounds." Rosalind says, "I'm willing to let you go if you just come down from the wardrobe and apologize to everyone." The boy stares at the Duchess in silence for a moment, and then suddenly bursts into loud sobs. After shedding some tears, he turns away from everyone and lies down on the dresser, his back to them. Outraged by his behavior, the heroine orders the room to be cleaned up and the daily chores to continue. However, she forbids giving the slave any food or water until he asks himself, effectively declaring a little war. But the slave turned out to be either too resilient or too stubborn, or maybe a mix of both. The furniture in the room is broken again, and the curtains, which were ordered from overseas, are torn to shreds. The heroine is amazed at how much energy this little slave has, considering he's making a mess every hour. Strolling through the mansion, Rosalind thinks that at this rate, he won't be able to stay here for long. Suddenly she stops, noticing traces of blood on the floor. The boy broke a flower pot and most likely stepped on the shards, and although he needs treatment, he won't let anyone near him. On top of everything else, he smashed a window, even though a normal person would never be able to do that. The mansion windows are made of top-tier crystal, and they're even enchanted. If he wanted to escape, he could have just opened the windows, so why Rosalind smashed them is beyond me. He must have wasted a ton of energy causing all that chaos, but he still hasn't asked for anything. One of the maids was super worried about him and snuck him some food, but the little beast just threw it everywhere and made more work for them as usual. The Duchess should punish the maid for disobeying orders, but this time, Rosalind decides to let it slide. Suddenly, a maid runs up to the heroine and says the kid's gone missing. The Duchess figured he was just hiding somewhere and would come back when he got hungry. But her guess was wrong, and he's not only refusing food, but he hasn't had a drop to drink in 4 days. No matter how tough the kid is, that's gotta mess him up. He could end up with some serious health problems. Besides, 4 days is how long he was actually in the mansion. His condition could have been bad even before that, and Rosalind's already thinking of acting like nothing happened. She imagines how pissed Nora would be if she heard her thoughts, but the Duchess gave him a choice from the start. As the maid approaches, Rosalind thinks she can't be responsible for someone who does whatever he wants. Nevertheless, she orders the servant to look for the boy, who's probably hiding somewhere on the property. But unfortunately, they couldn't find him anywhere, so the servants decided to search the garden. Rosalind, catching them at the exit, is sure that if he went into the garden, finding him there at night will be super tough. But the servants can't just leave him out there, so they grab lanterns and head out of the estate. Awful thoughts flood her mind. She imagines the slave losing consciousness, or worse, them having to handle the situation. Rosalind blames herself for going too far, and maybe she should have ignored Nora's words and just let him go right away. Suddenly, it hits the heroine like a ton of bricks, and she bolts out of the mansion. The girl blows past the servants, who are all over the place, calling for the boy, begging him to come back. She pauses for a split second at the edge of the woods, the wind whipping through her long hair. Looking around, Rosalind figures if the kid had a real reason to run, he wouldn't be here. Just then, across the river, she spots the boy lying under a tree. She was right. The kid was dying of thirst and went for the river. He's in rough shape, but he's still breathing. He's been stuck in that room all day, so all he could see was the park outside the window. That's why he smashed the window and jumped, then ran off looking for water, ending up deep in the woods. Rosalind's pissed at his stubbornness, 'cause the little punk wouldn't drink the water the maid offered him. The heroine lifts him up, not understanding why he ran from the people who care about him and came all this way. Maybe he just didn't want to take orders from people, or couldn't bring himself to trust them, even when things got real bad. Rosalind's goal was to teach him manners, but who knows, maybe for him it was just about staying alive. No etiquette rules are worth dying for, and you only need to be super strict when someone isn't in mortal danger. The heroine scoops up the boy, light as a feather, and is shocked at how skinny he is. Rosalind never gives second chances, let alone third, and he's the only one who's ever gotten this kind of break. The kid finally opened his eyes on the evening of the second day after the Duchess found him, and now she's sitting in a chair, letting out a heavy sigh. He's climbed up on the dresser again, and she's about at the end of her rope. The maid walks into the room, bringing the lady her dinner. The boy stares at the food with hungry eyes but stays put up there. Turning to him, Rosalind wearily tells him to knock it off and come down. After waiting a bit, she figures she'll just dig in and eat everything herself since he's not interested. But then, in a flash, the slave jumps down from the cabinet and shuffles nervously toward the table. He plops down next to the Duchess, grabs the plate, and starts chowing down on the meat with his bare hands. Truth is, Rosalind stayed up all night by his bed, spoon-feeding him soup. Maybe he actually remembers everything, and he wasn't just swallowing the food out of instinct to survive. Still, she's just glad the kid's eating something, anything at all. But when he climbs onto the table, she calls him out, explaining that food is for at the table, not on it. Hearing the stern tone in Rosalind's voice, he hops down, scrambles onto the bed, and hides under the covers. She's happy he's at least eating, but she's got a long road ahead teaching him manners. As she keeps eating, she says she doesn't even have a husband sleeping in her bed yet, and here's this little dude whose name she doesn't even know. The girl freezes when she suddenly hears the slave's voice, telling her his name is Luke 3. He says there were 5 Lukes, but the girl thinks the name is weird, more like the name of an object. He doesn't know his parents, since he was captured as a slave when he was little, and he doesn't have another name. No one had ever asked the boy his name before, and Rosalind is the first to do it. When she points out that human names don't have numbers, he says he's not human. After thinking for a moment, the heroine decides to call the boy Fenrir, but he doesn't understand why he needs a name. The girl says that from now on he will live with people, and if he doesn't like it, he can come up with a name himself. The boy is silent, and Rosalind asks why he suddenly decided to tell her his name, and he replies that it's payment for the bed. According to the Duchess, in that case, the name she's offering him is very expensive. She asks if he has any idea how much money went into making that bed. The kid figures a name ain't everything, and maybe talking is the price he pays. She thanks him with a little sarcasm for finally giving her the chance to chat. According to the slave, his voice is the one thing she can't take from him. And so far, nobody's been able to get him to say a word. She listens to the kid's story, totally surprised. He says he's never spoken to a single person in his entire life. Turns out they caught this little guy when he was just a baby. If Eleanor's right, he's actually gotta be at least 20 years old. He ended up back at auction either 'cause nobody wanted him or 'cause someone bought him and returned him. If he didn't listen to his owner and wouldn't even talk to him, the second one's probably what happened. The heroine decides not to ask the kid about his past, or she'll get a major headache. Getting up, Rosalind threatens that if he climbs on the table again, he's drinking water instead of soup. Besides, she gave him her bed while he was sick, and if he's better, he needs to move to the room she fixed up for him. But Fenrir, not saying a word, just turns away and wraps himself in the blanket. The heroine kind of expected that, but he totally doesn't listen to her, and she's thinking of just carrying him out of here. But since the kid just woke up, Rosalind decides to let him stay in this room for one more day. The girl's tired of arguing anyway, so exhausted, she just lies down next to him on the other half of the bed. The heroine looks at Fenrir and is amazed how quickly he fell back asleep. She catches herself thinking about how long it's been since she felt someone breathing next to her in bed. Maybe it's the name she gave the boy, but now the servants are treating him like family, even if not all of them are. The reason was obvious. Fenrir was basically a prisoner. The servants can't exactly be openly disrespectful, you know? But the kid was super sensitive to the hostile vibes around him. The heroine's back at that same dresser where Fenrir's holed up again, like always. He's hissing at Rosalind, telling her she's acting totally out of line. She doesn't see anything weird about wearing shoes, even if Fenrir's never worn them before. It pisses her off, 'cause 5 minutes barefoot and your feet are black, plus it's dangerous. Fenrir checks out his heels, trying to prove to Rosalind he didn't get dirty. The Duchess reminds him he just took a bath and made a total mess of the bathroom, too. She's laying down the law. Fenrir has to put on shoes. He finally climbs down from the dresser. The kid just kinda stood there staring at the boots, and Rosalind's like, "What's the holdup now?" Head down, Fenrir admits that slaves aren't allowed to wear shoes. Squatting down in front of him, she tells him he's not a slave anymore, and she burned the papers to prove it. When he asks why she did that, she says she doesn't need them at all. Telling Fenrir to hold still, Rosalind grabs his foot and puts the shoe on him. The boy shuffles his feet, so she tells him to stand up straight and try walking around. It's a little tight at first, but Rosalind explains he'll get used to it, as long as it doesn't hurt anywhere. Still unsure, Fenrir tells her he doesn't really need to wear them. Taking his hand, the Duchess declares that he has to if he wants to live there. Fenrir hasn't caused any trouble since, and now, while Rosalind reads, he just chills quietly beside her. He's not running away like he used to, and he doesn't get hostile being in the same room as people anymore. The heroine can't say she doesn't like spending time with him, especially since it's been forever since she lived with anyone. But there are also people in the mansion who avoid Fenrir, figuring he's too clever and knows who to cozy up to. Still, even Rosalind herself couldn't figure out what was going on in his head when he just stared out the window, doing nothing. So the heroine decides to ask if Fenrir's bored sitting there, and suggests they go outside and play. The kid's surprised, 'cause he never imagined she'd let him do that. And even though Rosalind explains to Fenrir that he's not locked up here and he's free to go out whenever he wants, he doesn't budge. Usually he does what you tell him, but if you ask him to make a choice, he gets all confused and ends up doing nothing. And right now, he hasn't moved and is still sitting by the window, looking at the garden. Rosalind gets up and tells Fenrir to follow her, so she can show him around the estate. Before long, he was already tearing through the grass among the trees in the estate's dense forest. The heroine told him to be careful, but Fenrir got his back up, thinking she was treating him like a baby. So, under the guise of taking walks, Rosalind started bringing him everywhere with her. At first, he seemed kind of lost, but he quickly got used to it and started reacting to things that caught his eye. He wasn't all that interested in the fancy decorated rooms, but he really liked the greenhouse and the garden. But even more than that, he loved the trees. The forest and the fields, where lots of grass and flowers grew, appealed to him more than a single flower growing alone. The heroine doesn't know anything about the Karanas, but they probably lived in the forest in large groups. It's not that Fenrir wasn't doing anything at all, it's just that he wasn't sure what he was allowed to do and what he wasn't. Some time passed, and Eleanor arrived at the Duke's estate to check on Fenrir's condition. The boy bristled and wouldn't let the doctor near him, but she patiently explained the reason for her visit. His recovery's taking longer than Nora thought. She never imagined it'd be a whole week. But when she says he needs more treatment, Fenrir suddenly jumps towards her. Rosalind yells at him, and he says he doesn't trust doctors, then hides back on the dresser. The Duchess orders Fenrir to stop being stubborn and get down now, since Nora's the one who healed him. After thinking about it, he finally gets off the dresser, and Rosalind thinks maybe they should clear the room of furniture. Hearing that, Fenrir snaps back that he'll just climb the wall then, and Eleanor senses a hint of closeness in their argument. Calling all doctors quacks, the guy lies down on the bed for his checkup. Nora assures him she's not a quack, though she can't speak for others, and asks his name. The woman's surprised by his answer because Fenrir was the name of Rosalind's old cat. Hugging herself, embarrassed, the heroine explains that they were fresh out of normal names. Right then, Nora's asking if there are any good spots that could take Fenrir in. Morin's got places, and all we gotta do is tell him. They'll get everything ready. Hearing that, Fenrir looks at her, surprised, but she's all flustered and looks away. She's so used to being with him all the time, she forgot she never planned on keeping him at the estate in the first place. Eleanor promised way back then to find him a good home, and for Fenrir's sake, she needs to send him somewhere he'll be better off. Since this dude can get stronger there, Rosalind promises to give Morin all the cash they need. According to Nora, Fenrir's in decent shape. Looks fine, all his organs are working. But when she says he's free to leave now, the guy starts growling at her. Rosalind tells him he better thank Eleanor for patching him up. But he just clenches the sheets, furious, and says he didn't ask for any of this. Fenrir, looking at Eleanor, says he didn't ask to be healed or saved. Besides, he never said he wanted to go to the orphanage or come here and generally doesn't want anything. Fenrir tells Rosalind not to kid herself that all this is for him, saying that both the Duchess and that crazy lady who brought him here only think about themselves. He jumps out the window. When Nora asks if they should run after him, Rosalind replies that she's not his owner, and he has to come back on his own. The girl's head is spinning, and she offers to escort Eleanor to the carriage. After seeing the doctor off, the heroine returns to her bedroom and collapses on the bed to rest. Looking out the window, she wonders how long Fenrir has been in her house. Unable to bear the silence that has settled on the estate, Rosalind finally goes out to look for the runaway. Finding him in the crown of a tall tree, the girl asks if he's running away on purpose, so she'll go looking for him. Fenrir's not saying anything, so she's like, "Hey, why aren't you answering me?" Then he tells her to leave him alone and get lost, 'cause he's hiding here so Rosalind doesn't find him. Arms crossed, she dryly points out that if he really didn't want to be found, he should have bolted off the property. Fenrir's take is, if she wanted him gone so bad, she shouldn't have bothered saving his butt. Since he's acting like a total kid, Rosalind asks how old he is and finds out he's around 22. He figures that about 15 years ago there was this dude his height who was 7 back then, so that's his guess. She wonders if he's ever wanted to live with other people like him. Because at that place Nora was talking about, there's a bunch of ex-captives, and he'd probably be better off there. When Fenrir asks what'll happen to him, Rosalind says if he's lucky, he'll get citizenship and can go wherever he wants. But according to him, they caught him on the other side of the continent, and that was his 4th time trying to escape. Citizenship means jack squat. They could snatch him up and sell him off to the sticks, so nowhere's safe for him. According to Fenrir, safe is fleeting, which makes things even worse for him. He can't say if he wants to stay here, but he sure as hell doesn't want to be tossed around like a sack of potatoes. Staring off into the distance, Fenrir suddenly declares he'll head out that way, since he felt like he didn't belong here anyway. Besides, his opinion doesn't matter worth a damn, and at least this time he's not getting sold off to some creep. Rosalind doesn't owe this guy anything, and if anything he sees her as his savior, but even so, she can't shake this nagging feeling. She used to get this feeling all the time, and now she recognizes it. It's nothing but responsibility. Suddenly looking at Fenrir, she tells him he can stay here if that's what he wants. But she's only willing to do that if he listens to her, because she could ditch him in the capital in a heartbeat. If she wanted to keep him as her slave, she wouldn't be making deals, she'd just slap some chains on him. Rosalind runs this whole estate, but nobody's exactly her slave. When Fenrir asks what they are then, she tells him they're workers and servants, but the guy doesn't see any difference between the two. Rosalind says a slave doesn't get to pick their master, but servants do. And since Fenrir wanted the right to choose, now he gets to decide for himself. The guy stares at her, surprised, and asks why she's giving him that choice. The girl says, if she, Duchess Appleton, finds a stray cat in the street, she's not going to throw it under a carriage, even though she can't stop it from running away. Rosalind adds that from now on, he's got to sit at the table during meals, and nobody's going to wait on him hand and foot. The girl turns away from the tree and strides confidently toward the house. In the morning, the maid serves the lady her coffee and asks if Fenrir will be back. The second Rosalind tells him it's all up to him, the kid jumps right through the open window. When Fenrir told her he'd decided to stay at her estate, she told him her full name. Since everyone else calls her Your Highness, he figured that was her name. Rosalind said he could call her that too if he wanted, but he never did. A few more days go by, and now, back at the estate, the Duchess immediately asks the maid where Fenrir is. The maid says he's in his room, reading a book. Maybe it's just natural, but there's something noble and refined about Fenrir that just doesn't fit a kid. She couldn't put it into words, but it reminded her of a cat warming itself by the fireplace on a winter night. Still, Rosalind could never bring herself to actually say that to him. Ever since Fenrir decided to stay at the mansion, he hasn't complained once about his new life. So one day, things got heated when they just couldn't see eye to eye. Fenrir's flipping out because they made him wear shorts that he thinks are for little kids, like 7-year-olds. Rosalind's barely holding back laughter, looking at him and says the outfit really suits him. And when Fenrir repeats that he's not a child, she sighs and suggests he prove it. In that instant, claws out, he lunges at her and knocks her to the ground. Teeth gritted with fury, Fenrir demands she stop looking down on him just because he's got short arms and legs. But before he can even process it, the heroine's back on her feet, throws him off, and slams his face into the floor. Rosalind says it's not about his arms and legs, but she's the one calling the shots in this house, not him. Getting close to his ear, the heroine asks if he really thinks her life is all sunshine and rainbows just because she's got it made. Letting Fenrir go, the girl calls for the maid and orders her to get a tailor to make the guy some new clothes. After that, he never went after Rosalind again. The heroine's sitting across from Fenrir, thinking back to that incident, and figures they've pretty much worked everything out, except for his education. At first, she wanted to hire a pro tutor, but her high status made that impossible. Rosalind Idris Appledon used to be a princess, but now she was a duchess. She was surrounded by aristocrats, and all the teachers she knew were from noble families too. There's no way any of them would ever put up with the indignity of educating a prisoner. So she took on his education herself, even though Fenrir didn't get why he needed it. Rosalind was sure that writing, arithmetic, etiquette, and manners would be useful to him in everyday life. The heroine was worried that taking on his whole education by herself wouldn't be easy. But Fenrir turned out to have an incredible knack for learning. Dude picked up the alphabet in 30 minutes and was reading by noon. Teaching a student this sharp who just gets everything right away was a total breeze. Fenrir's heading through the dark hallway to the library when suddenly someone sticks a foot out, trying to trip him. But the guy jumps over it, stops, and sees a servant standing there, totally freaked by his killer glare. A maid pops up between them, worried, asking Fenrir if he's hurt, and then starts scolding the servant. But when the guy just silently turns to keep going, he hears the servants whispering behind his back. According to the maid, if you're gonna mess with someone, you gotta go all the way, 'cause the prisoner's got super sensitive senses. The servants are pissed they gotta put up with this slave, who the Duchess is for some reason nice to. They're saying this little punk doesn't even know his place, just like all the other prisoners. They think it's hilarious how Fenrir's acting like he's some big shot. The next day, sitting by the window, the guy asks Rosalind how long he's gonna be stuck here. He wants to know, figuring she's not planning on keeping him locked up on the estate forever. According to her, Fenrir can leave whenever he wants, and she knows it'll happen eventually. Rosalind thinks nothing lasts forever, especially since he already gets annoyed with her sometimes. After a short silence, Fenrir studies her face, then gets up from where he's sitting. As he leaves the room, passing by Rosalind, he tells her he's never felt any animosity towards her. She figured Fenrir had become way more compliant than before because she'd tamed him. She didn't get why he was still here, but she never asked him about it. Maybe she didn't ask because she couldn't guess the answer, or maybe she was scared a surprise answer would catch her off guard. Even she didn't know which of those two reasons was closer to the truth. Fenrir had grabbed all the books Rosalind listed from the library and was now walking down the hall, practically blind behind the stack. On the way, he bumps into a guy he's never seen around here before. The man, clearly surprised, looks Fenrir up and down and asks his buddy what a slave is doing in the hallway. The knight Rosalind hired gets flustered and tries to explain that the kid's not a slave. Fenrir knew Rosalind wasn't thrilled with this knight. She'd hired him on someone else's recommendation. But he doesn't recognize the other guy, the one who's still complaining and starting to raise his voice. So the knight whispers in his ear that this is a kid being raised by Her Highness. Suddenly, the man flies off the handle, saying Rosalind clearly wasn't satisfied with her previous companions, so now she's got a pet. Feeling his arrogant gaze on him, Fenrir starts to feel that familiar anger building inside. The kid knows that look of utter contempt aimed right at him. He freezes while the guy winds up his cane, ready to strike the slave. Next thing you know, Fenrir takes a hard shot to the face, books flying everywhere. He remembers Rosalind carefully picking out those books for him, and his anger just starts boiling over. The knight tries to stop Master Lucian, but the guy just whacks the slave with the cane again. Fenrir looks at his hand, covering where he got hit, and sees blood on it. Lucian orders the knight to get this disgusting slave out of here now. Fenrir just stares at the guy, and that look just pisses him off even more. Lucian raises his leg, ready to kick him again, but he doesn't get the chance. Fenrir jumps up, does a flip, and kicks the guy right in the jaw. The knight freaks out and rushes to him, promising to call a doctor. Lucian's ordering everyone to catch that slave right now, but he's getting away, leaving his books scattered on the floor. Rosalind's chilling in her room, looking forward to some downtime. She hasn't had a break from work and training Fenrir in ages. Just then, the door bursts open, and a guy, totally out of breath, stumbles in. He jumps right up on the table, ignoring Rosalind's protests. Getting right up in her face, Fenrir looks her dead in the eye and suddenly asks her to get out of here. Rosalind's taken aback at first and tells him it's not cool to be on the table, then asks why he didn't bring the books. But Fenrir keeps pushing, saying someone's after her and it sounds like they mean her harm. It's only now that she notices the bloody gash on his forehead. Knight Elliot rushes into the room and Rosalind asks him what the heck is going on. Lucian shoves him aside as he enters, talking about settling things with that slave once and for all. Seeing Rosalind in the room, the guy just cracks this nasty, smug grin. Getting to her feet, she turns to the knight, the one who just arrived at the estate. She tells him straight up, nobody gets in the mansion without her say-so. The girl walks up to Elliot and asks him, did he seriously not know that? The knight's confused, like how could that possibly apply to Lord Lucian, who's also getting pissed at what she's saying. The guy asks Rosalind why he can't come to his own damn house, considering he's her husband. Not even bothering to answer his comment, she just smacks him across the face, loud. Right in front of Fenrir and Elliot, who are totally stunned, she knees Lucian right in the family jewels. Snatching the knight's sword from its sheath, Rosalind presses the blade against the throat of the guy now kneeling on the floor. She reminds him that disrespecting royalty is a one-way ticket to meet your maker. Lucian's yelling that the Emperor knows about this visit, and what's more, he never signed the divorce papers, so he's still Rosalind's husband and a member of the royal family. She's just bummed he still doesn't get that they were over the day she sent him the divorce request. He's wrong if he thinks whether or not he stamped those papers makes any difference. Rosalind's dying to know what's going on in Lucian's head. The guy's so clueless he's still holding out hope. Saying she doesn't need his seal, she presses the sword's point to her ex-husband's hand, threatening to chop off his finger. His Majesty can be told that Lucian loved Rosalind so much, he stamped the letter and immediately passed away. She offers to cut off his thumb right now, while he's still kicking so her words aren't just empty threats. Crawling away from her, Lucian insists he's still not divorcing her, no matter how much she threatens him. He says he put up with her bringing guys here, but this behavior of hers is just unbelievable. Threatening him with the sword again, Rosalind orders Lucian to shut his damn mouth. She didn't send him divorce papers because of other guys, but because there was absolutely nothing going on in his head. Though she's not gonna pretend Lucian was exactly pulling his weight at night either. And if he touches anything in her house again, she'll chop him into little pieces and bury them in the pig pen. She looked at Lucian with utter contempt and he couldn't say a damn thing. The guy just barely managed to pull out some kind of box and slammed it on the table. After that, he bolted like he was trying to escape the entire estate. There was no point in looking to see what was in the box. It was probably just the unsigned divorce papers. Handing the sword back to Elliot, Rosalind says if anything like that happens again, she'll pull the weapon through his throat, not just out of the sheath. If he's not sure whether or not someone should be allowed in the mansion, he needs to ask the butler. He needs to swallow his pride and ask for help from someone lower in rank if he wants to keep living here. Turning to Fenrir, she tells him, no messing around, to get his butt in gear and follow her. Once they're both inside the lab, she tells him to show her the wound so she can patch him up. Wiping the blood off his forehead, she's relieved it's just a scratch and she can fix it with some ointment instead of calling a doc. She figures what happened was for the best, since Elliot thought he was too good to watch over a slave, and things were just getting nasty. Rosalind tells Fenrir to hang tight, 'cause she's about to put on some cream that's gonna sting a little. The guy says it's really not necessary, and she notices the wound actually has already started to close. Even so, holding his chin, Rosalind applies the ointment anyway. Her face was way too close, and Fenrir suddenly flinches and turns away, not understanding why his chest just tightened up like that. While she's putting the first aid kit away, he watches her every move, then suddenly says he didn't know she had a husband. But Rosalind says he shouldn't worry about a guy they haven't been living with as husband and wife for ages. Fenrir's wondering why she even bothered marrying him in the first place. According to her, getting hitched ain't a guarantee for forever love, and people don't always marry for that anyway. Happens all the time, even with regular folks, and especially in royal families, but Fenrir just doesn't get it. She's heard that prisoners, depending on their lineage, only stick with one partner their whole lives. Fenrir thinks that's messed up, but she's not even following what he's on about. Dude's saying when Rosalind gets curious, she fires off questions like crazy without even thinking, so he thinks it's a raw deal that she never tells him anything about herself. Now she gets it, this little jerk's been holding on to a grudge about this the whole time. But, not being able to deny what he's saying, Rosalind asks what exactly he's so interested in. Fenrir asks why she got married so quick, like he's been waiting for the chance to ask that question. He just noticed the girl doesn't look happy at all in this marriage. According to Rosalind, Lucian was the poorest of all her suitors. Her mother figured if she was stuck with a broke dude, she'd smarten up and try to control him. For a split second, Fenrir thought Rosalind looked totally gutted. The heroine's mom wanted her to dress flashy, wear gowns, and dance at balls, wanted Rosalind to think about hairstyles and babies like all the other girls, but the heroine herself had loved weapons and swords since she was a kid, and was drawn to them. She beat her brother in a competition when she was 7 and never missed a chance to show off her skills. Plus, the girl had some clout, since she was tight with the knights. But in her mother's eyes, Rosalind's passion looked like something else entirely. This whole thing looked to the woman like a scheme to seize the throne with an army. She kept telling her daughter that swords wouldn't get her anywhere, and she shouldn't reach for something that wasn't meant for her. But Rosalind never really cared about the throne, 'cause she's got zero interest in politics. Maybe her mom was trying to undermine her position by pushing this marriage, since nobody would want to see Lucian as the emperor's hubby. To fix Rosalind's reputation, she needed to dump him and marry someone else, but divorce was off the table. She'd need the emperor's permission for that. His stamp is required on the paperwork. Rosalind's dad was in her mom's corner, and nothing happened around here without his say-so. Her divorce request sounded like she was after the throne, and if she liked someone, her parents suggested having a fling on the side. If Rosalind was gunning for the throne, she would have said she wanted to remarry some big shot with power. Then the powerful nobles would have backed her, and she could finalize the divorce later, after becoming empress. But in that case, Rosalind would have to fight for the throne and absolutely win. The thing is, she didn't want any of that because if she lost, she could be banished or even, taken care of. And if she won, she'd have to live her whole life on edge with a ton of heavy responsibilities. You'd have to work your tail off to hide your weaknesses from your enemies and constantly second-guess everyone, not even trusting the people closest to you. Rosalind hated politics because she didn't want to put up with that kind of life, and trying to reform things or change anything was pointless. So, the way she was living now was the best option for her, but she didn't see the point in explaining all that. Luckily, if the current emperor kicks the bucket, you can get a divorce without his okay, so as soon as her folks passed, Rosalind wrote up the divorce papers. She sent them to Lucian ages ago, and he'd been pretty quiet about it, and then he suddenly shows up and pulls this crap. Judging by what he was saying about the emperor, he's the one who put him up to this. The current ruler of the empire isn't on his sister's side, he's on Lucian's. He sided with her parents, thinking Rosalind was just a wild girl who wouldn't listen to her husband. And in his eyes, Lucian was the poor husband who had a rough time because of his selfish and rude wife. Thinking about all that now, it just seems ridiculous to her. Rosalind finishes telling Fenrir her story, even though she thinks there's nothing interesting about her marriage. After all, she kicked Lucian out only 6 months after he moved into this house. Fenrir's silent, and suddenly she remembers him showing up with the offer to run away. She asks with a smile if that was his way of protecting her from Lucian. Hearing that, Fenrir flinches, and suddenly his whole face turns red. Chilling images from the past flash before his eyes. Gathering his thoughts, he states that anyone who barges into a house like that can't have good intentions. Thing is, Rosalind says the people who want to mess with her don't exactly use the front door. They either hop the fence, smash a window, or, slip something nasty into the food. When Fenrir asks who else wants to hurt her, she just tells him not to worry about it. She puts her hand over his and promises she'll take care of him. Fenrir's totally thrown when she tells him not to worry about anything happening to him. And even though that's not what he meant at all, she figures it wouldn't make sense to snatch him just to get to her. Fenrir finally snaps, totally indignant, because that's not what he's worried about. But Rosalind's serious and says if anyone breaks into the estate, he shouldn't try to save her, just hide himself. She tells him to climb a tree or get under the bed because he's apparently good at that kind of thing. Fenrir hangs his head because what he really wanted to say was that he's scared for Rosalind. Meanwhile, she's still daydreaming about him having to go on the run if she gets offed. After a beat, she decides to give Fenrir Moran's address, just in case he needs to bolt. At first, she thought about Nora, but that might be too risky, since she's someone close to her. Hopping off the table, Fenrir declares he can handle himself, and Rosalind too. She reminds him about those 4 times he got snatched up before. She admits he's fast and agile, but even Lucian managed to beat him up, so he can't protect anyone. Sensing she went too far, Rosalind tells him not to be ashamed of being vulnerable, just let others protect him. Claiming he knocked over some books because of her husband and needs to pick them up, Fenrir turns and walks out of the room. The girl yells after him not to call Lucian that, she wants nothing to do with him. As Fenrir, grinding his teeth, leaves the room, Rosalind wonders how someone who acts like a kid can be 20 years old. Thump, 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 the guy stomps down the hall, then stops, glaring at his hands, pissed. He's always been self-conscious about being a late bloomer, but ever since he moved here, something's been different. This dude's gonna make Rosalind regret what she said, and if Lucian shows his face again, he's not holding back. The next day, our girl steps out of the carriage, Fenrir right beside her. She asks if he wants to go anywhere, but he's clueless, just adjusting his cap. Ever since Lucian caused that whole scene at the estate, Rosalind and Fenrir haven't breathed a word about him. And the guy who almost lost a finger, he hasn't shown his face around here since. Fenrir, who was kinda expecting him to drop by for reasons, had to let it go because he was buried in his studies. In class one day, Rosalind hands him a slip of paper, tells him to memorize Moran's address. Moran was one of the few ex-captives who got citizenship and now runs a shelter, helping folks with nowhere else to go. The heroine suddenly realized that even if Fenrir had the address, there's no way he'd actually find it. So she suggested he go into town with her, since she was heading out to the cane store anyway. Rosalind suggested Fenrir check out where Moran's house was for himself. When he asked if he really needed to know, she said it would be better if he had another safe place to go. Fenrir was worried everyone on the street would stare at him because of his ears and tail. Rosalind said he wouldn't have any problems with her, and besides, there are a lot of ex-captives living in the city. The girl asked if he wanted to ask about something, but Fenrir refused to say anything and kept staring at the address. Grabbing her coat, the heroine headed for the door, and the guy followed her. And now Rosalind's asking Fenrir again if he wants to go somewhere. He reminds her about wanting to buy a cane and that he doesn't know where to go in the city. The second they hopped in the carriage, she could tell Fenrir wasn't interested in anything. Maybe he's just got a naturally detached personality, or maybe it's the way he grew up. Either way, Rosalind doesn't want to push him, and meanwhile, the sky's getting all cloudy. She's thinking that maybe Fenrir's world could get a little brighter if she showed him around. She tells him to stick with her and take a look around, and she'll even show him how to find houses by their address. Smiling, she tells him not to fall behind, and Fenrir follows Rosalind, holding onto his cap. She tells him not to sweat it, 'cause you can't even see his ears under the hat. Fenrir trails behind her, checking out the streets, the people, and the shops with all kinds of stuff. Suddenly, he gets this feeling like someone's watching him, and he turns around to check it out. Figuring it was nothing, Fenrir's about to keep going when he bumps right into some old lady coming the other way. He yelps, totally caught off guard, and just then the wind snatches his cap right off his head. Fenrir grabs his head, trying to hide his ears from prying eyes. But this little old lady, she's patting him, apologizing to the kid because she bumped into him, being blind and all. Fenrir breathes a sigh of relief, realizing the woman didn't see anything 'cause she's blind as a bat. He snatches up his cap, stoked that the other people walking by didn't even give him a second glance. But then bam! Fenrir's surrounded by a crowd, all worried about the kid taking a spill. Meanwhile, Rosalind's pumped that finding the right house wasn't as hard as she thought it'd be. She announces they're here, saying this is the place to get the best walking sticks in the whole city. But just as she's telling Fenrir to head inside, she realizes he's not even standing next to her. Before she can even freak out, she's already right beside him. Rosalind figures he's just spacing out, but Fenrir just glares at her, not saying a word. She asks why he's so pale and sweaty, but he claims he's fine, just hasn't been out in a while. Still, Rosalind's worried, 'cause Fenrir's face definitely doesn't look like someone who's fine. Holding his shoulder, she suggests they head back early if being in such a crowded place is getting to him. Fenrir shakes off her hand and, repeating that there's no problem, suggests they check out the shop. Rosalind agrees, and they step inside a place packed wall to wall with all kinds of canes. The shop owner comes out to greet them, not recognizing Rosalind at first. When he realizes it's Lady Appledon, he rushes over, all excited, to shake her hand. The guy says Rosalind's obviously stopped breaking canes as often as she did when she was a kid, trying to fence with them. She points out it's been 10 years, and he hasn't changed his habit of talking about everything like it was yesterday. The shopkeeper just laughs, 'cause when the same thing happens every day, 10 years ago feels like yesterday. Catching himself, he asks Rosalind what brings her in today, and with company, no less. While she's explaining her visit, Fenrir's hiding behind her, feeling the heat from the guy's stare. The owner suggests she head upstairs to check out the suitable items he's got in stock. As Rosalind walks past Fenrir, he teases her about her cane fencing obsession. She says when her mom banned her from training, she couldn't exactly carry a sword around. Fenrir laughs and asks why she's making excuses. Rosalind doesn't even know why she's telling this to that annoying little punk. As the shopkeeper heads upstairs, she invites Fenrir to come with them, but he declines. To her relief, he seems to be doing a bit better, so she leaves him alone without worrying too much. Still mocking Rosalind and promising not to start fencing with canes in here, Fenrir starts checking out the merchandise. The heroine heads up to the second floor, leaving him alone, while a stranger in a cloak watches him from outside the window. The owner tells Rosalind to take her time looking at the canes and assures her that everything on display is flawless. She knows his craftsmanship better than anyone, but asks him to show her something simpler, something that won't attract attention. According to the man, he has a few plain wooden ones without any embellishments. Suddenly, he remembers a cane that might be perfect for her. He brings out a box for Rosalind, and inside is a very special piece. He didn't usually make canes like this, but he once got a very interesting request from a VIP. The heroine takes the cane in her hand, feeling the weight of something more familiar than just wood. Rosalind pulls on the handle and confirms her suspicion. It's a sword. Even though she really likes this thing, she admits she's not as crazy about swords as she used to be. The guy's pretty surprised to hear that, but offers to carve her a new walking stick instead. They agree on that, but just then, there's a crash and a bang from downstairs. Rosalind races down to the first floor, but instead of Fenrir, she just finds a mess and broken glass. The heroine, soaked to the bone, sitting on a chair in the middle of the shop. The owner hands her a towel and tells her to get closer to the fireplace so she doesn't catch a cold. The guy's sorry about the disappearance of the kid she came with, since they haven't found him after searching for hours. Rosalind sits facing the shop door, listening to the steady tick-tock of the clock. The door opens and a knight walks in, leading the search party. He reports to Lady Appledon that the knights have scoured the whole area, but they still haven't found the child. As soon as Rosalind realized Fenrir was missing, she contacted the residents and mobilized over 10 people. By now, they've turned the entire capital upside down looking for him. But the only lead they've got is that some lady ran into Fenrir. She offered to walk him home, but he bolted and disappeared in a flash. Rosalind's hoping that they can't find him just because he's really good at hiding. But she's still worried that someone might have, taken him somewhere against his will. She's trying not to think the worst, because when Fenrir met that lady, he was on his own. Since they came by carriage today, Fenrir probably doesn't know how to get back to the mansion. So the only place he might have gone is Maureen's house, but there's been no word from there. The shop owner comes up to her, offering her some tea to warm up. The guy's sure the kid'll turn up soon. He couldn't have gotten far. Rosalind feels the tea's steam warm and caress her face, but Fenrir's probably freezing his butt off right now. She decides to join the search too, even though the knight's saying everything will be fine. He doesn't see the point if the lady catches a cold, but Rosalind just glares daggers at him. Just then, the shop door bursts open, and a knight from the search party shoves some dude inside. This shady character in the cloak was found lurking in an alley. The knight figures he's the one who snatched the kid from here. Rosalind lunges at the stranger, grabs him by the throat, and demands to know where he took Fenrir. The guy's not talking, so she starts kicking the crap out of him. The perp's shaking like a leaf and swears he had no idea he belonged to someone. Hearing that, Rosalind nails the guy again, this time right in the face. Not wanting to repeat herself, she pins him to the floor with her foot and demands to know where he took Fenrir. According to the guy, the kid just suddenly ran off, and he was just doing what he was told. Confirming the exact location where this guy was found, Rosalind heads for the exit. The knight thinks Fenrir might have gotten lost trying to find his way back to the estate. Hearing that, it suddenly clicks for our hero. She knows where to look. Storming out of the shop, she orders everyone rounded up. This scumbag obviously has accomplices. She doesn't care if they're a little worse for wear after they're caught, as long as they can still talk. Turning to the shop owner, Rosalind apologizes and asks for a day, promising to make up for the damage. She tasks the knight with looking after the old man, while she sets off to find Fenrir. The guy's telling her to stay put while the rest of them search. But Rosalind's dead, set on finding him herself. Fenrir might be scared and hide even better from a bunch of armored knights. The knight still doesn't want to just let the Duchess go off on her own, suggesting they wait for backup. But she's losing it, saying she's perfectly capable of holding an umbrella herself. Rosalind stands in the rain, looking around, not giving a damn about the weather or the people passing by. She's checking out the spot where the slaver lost Fenrir and the place where the runaway bumped into that woman. If you just keep heading straight from here, you'll end up on the road that leads out of town. Rosalind suddenly realizes that this road looks familiar because it leads right back to the Blue Mansion. Thinking about it, when they were driving here, Fenrir kept staring out the window the whole time. Maybe he wasn't just bored or curious. Maybe he was staring out the window so intently for a different reason. Rosalind searched every road the carriage traveled today, but the girl couldn't find even a trace of Fenrir anywhere. The last place she'd expect is a park, like a weird little forest inside the city. Fenrir has a habit of climbing up high when he's in danger, and the trees here are so thick they make a forest. This park is the perfect place to hide, unlike the city streets covered in all kinds of buildings. Fenrir's smart, and instead of running back to the mansion on his little legs, he probably figured it'd be faster to catch the carriage heading back to the residence. If Rosalind's guess is right, the place where he could spot the Duke's crest is right here. The girl stops, reaching the tallest tree in the area, not far from the road. Looking at the treetop, she realizes nothing's changed since last time, because among the branches, with his back to her, lies Fenrir. Rosalind's calling him, telling him to come down so they can head home. She says the guys who tried to grab him are locked up, so he's safe now. Fenrir looks at her and tells Rosalind he'll never be safe, no matter where he goes. He says it's all the same wherever he is, because that's just how he was born. Looking at him, she feels like things are exactly the same as when he first decided to stay at her place. Fenrir always avoided crowds, but even knowing that, she dragged him along, thinking he'd be safe with her. Rosalind feels like she's the one who put Fenrir in danger, like he could have been sold into servitude again. She apologizes for being careless, but he doesn't blame her for some creeps trying to snatch him. Fenrir only blames himself because it doesn't matter who you sell an untamed, dark-skinned person to. Seller or buyer, none of them care if someone like him has a family, citizenship, or even an owner. That's why the guys who buy slaves keep them locked up in windowless dungeons until they're grown. It's all to make sure nobody can swipe their merchandise. With a lump in his throat, Fenrir tells Rosalind that he's not getting any bigger, so even if he goes to Moran's place, nothing's gonna change. He'll just be stuck inside her house for the rest of his life, never able to take a single step outside. Fenrir admits how badly he wants to escape, but all he sees is darkness, because there's nowhere in the world where he can live in peace. Wherever he goes, there's no place that's right for him, but this time, he suddenly thought about Rosalind's house. Before, when Fenrir ran away, he only thought about hiding really well, but this time the thought popped into his head that he should go back to her. After listening to him, she says there's nothing wrong with having a place to come back to, and he's free to leave and return whenever he wants. But Fenrir doesn't want to leave, and Rosalind isn't going to chase him. She says that if something happens to her, he has to find his own way, but Fenrir begs her not to say that. The thing is, if she dies in that mansion, he wants to be buried right next to her. Hearing those words, the heroine just stands there, like she's been struck by lightning. Nora warned her that the Karen tribe lives by instinct, and they stay in a childlike form until they meet their partner. After they mature, they stay with their chosen one forever and die together, so he'll either live his whole life under someone's protection or protecting someone else. Family is everything to this tribe, but Fenrir's never had a home. He's starved for simple human affection. Rosalind didn't know what to do because she couldn't give him back to Ellen, and she couldn't just set him free. Taking the heroine's hand, Eleanor said she didn't mind her protecting him, but she shouldn't cross the line. Then Rosalind laughed, remembering when she proposed to Nora once, but Nora, being in love with some viscount, turned her down. Eleanor got pissed when the girl suddenly decided to bring up that dumb childhood thing from when they were 7. Then she tried to explain to Rosalind that protection should give him confidence, so Fenrir could live on without her. Back then, she didn't grasp the weight of those words, thinking education was the first step to freedom. But Rosalind had absolutely no clue what Fenrir was really thinking. And now, looking her straight in the eye, he's asking if he can count on her. It never even crossed her mind he felt that way, so she tells him to come down and head home for now. Rosalind explains that he needs to find a partner to grow up, and staying in the mansion won't solve anything. When she pushed him to meet his own kind, that's what she meant, not that she was kicking him out. Fenrir asks what happens after he chooses a partner, and she says that person becomes his family. Those well-meaning words of hers somehow strike a painful chord in his heart. Looking at him, Rosalind couldn't even imagine how far his thoughts were racing. She didn't have to wait long, though, because with one quick leap, he's down beside her. The heroine offers him her hand, and he hesitantly touches her palm. On the way home, Rosalind watches Fenrir sleeping in the carriage seat. The way he crashed the second they got in the carriage, you could tell today really messed with his head. The girl touches the soaked Fenrir and gently strokes him. As soon as they arrive at the mansion, the butler announces that he has already prepared a hot bath. The heroine smiles. It's the best thing she's heard all day. But when Rosalind tries to wake Fenrir, he doesn't move for some reason. The girl gets scared and, turning him over, discovers that his whole face is burning up with fever. The heroine scoops him up in her arms and, running, orders the butler to urgently summon Noah. After the news of Fenrir's disappearance, the servants' moods in the residence were chaotic all day. Seeing him like that, they couldn't hide the mixed emotions hitting them all at once. Standing by Fenrir's bed, the heroine anxiously waits for the examination to finish. But Noah can't pinpoint the exact reason he's feeling so rough. Rosalind's confused. What else could it be? Fenrir obviously caught a cold getting soaked to the bone. Noah decides to start with a fever reducer, planning to keep a close eye on how he's doing. Just then, a maid comes in and says her little brother had the same kind of fever a few years back when he got pneumonia. She says her brother passed away a couple weeks later, but Rosalind, not wanting to hear it, tells everyone to get out. The butler tries to convince her to leave the room too, so she doesn't catch anything, but she refuses to budge. Rosalind stayed by his bedside all night, taking care of him. Fenrir was delirious the whole time, and she didn't get a wink of sleep until morning. Even with all the medicine he's taken, his condition is getting worse, fast. When the clock struck midnight, Fenrir actually howled in pain. For a split second, he'd snap awake, stare blankly ahead, then slip back into the darkness, passing out again. It's been ages, but still no word from the guy we sent to get Eleanor. Fenrir's fever is raging. Every time you touch him, it feels like you're grabbing red-hot iron. Noah's tried every medicine he can think of, but nothing's working. Rosalind's getting pissed that he keeps saying the same thing, because his temperature hasn't dropped a single degree. She yelled that she didn't hire Noah to just stand around and throw his hands up in the air. Apologizing, the doctor said that even if the fever breaks, Fenrir might not be able to speak again. He said that sometimes this kind of thing can leave you with lasting problems, maybe even total shutdown, and he might not make it. And now Rosalind's sitting by his bed, blaming herself for dragging him, tired and soaked, straight back to the mansion. She gently brushes the sweat-soaked hair away from Fenrir's face. She's beating herself up for taking him to town against his will, and then not being able to protect him once they were outside the estate. Rosalind tells the sleeping Fenrir about the time she snuck out of the estate as a kid and went to the market with Nora. Before that, she'd never been outside the palace walls, and the market was full of life, totally different from the stuffy balls. Rosalind really loved the food that the street vendors were selling. Maybe it was because of the food that a stray cat started following her. Rosalind wanted to just walk on, but Nora took the cat into an alley and shared her food with it, while Rosalind watched. But while feeding it, Nora got worried that the cat might die of hunger if left alone, so she decided to take it with them. The truth is, Rosalind just wanted to look good in Eleanor's eyes, since she was her best friend. Even though Fenrir might get pissed hearing he's got a cat's name, the heroine explains that's what the cat was called. The cat was a pain at first, but the maids took care of him, and Rosalind only visited when she felt like it. After Fenrir showed up, Nora started visiting more often, and when she wasn't around, the cat was there so she wasn't bored. But a year later, the cat stopped eating, so Rosalind decided to bring the little lump lying still to the table. Fenrir was always super interested in human food, and the girl figured he wouldn't turn down food like that. So Rosalind crumbled some bread, and just like she thought, he happily ate every last crumb. That's how the cat died, and the memories are still fresh in the heroine's mind. The little critter in her arms suddenly coughed up blood, went into convulsions, and died, which was a total shock to the girl. But because of that, poison was found in the bread, the chef and maids were arrested, but the whole thing was quickly swept under the rug. The culprit could have been someone supporting her brother or even Rosalind's mother, because they were the only ones who might want her gone. The head servant told the girl that Fenrir knew she cared and saved her by giving his life. Honestly, those words sound kinda weird to her, since he was just a kitten who needed a home. But Rosalind can't help thinking that if she hadn't brought him home, he might have lived a long life. Maybe she shouldn't have taken a creature that was doing just fine on the streets, just to look good in front of a friend. After that, Rosalind never got another pet, because she started to fear that someone might die for her. That's why she cut ties with the knights and gave up her sword. The gossips, who didn't know the details, were all over her, making fun of how fickle she was. But running from fear wasn't exactly heroic, so she didn't blame anyone. Looking at Fenrir, she apologizes for giving him that name. She's sorry she brushed off his concerns and forgot for a moment that she doesn't have the right to be responsible for anyone. Even if Elon brings someone else home or Nora asks for a favor, she promises herself she's done taming anyone else. She promises Fenrir that if he dies, she'll fulfill his last wish and bury him in this mansion. Rosalind has no idea if that's really what he'd want after he's gone, but his lips are sealed now. Getting close to Fenrir's face, she promises never to abandon him no matter what, and begs him to wake up already. Waking up in the morning next to Rosalind, Fenrir gently places her hand on the pillow, then gets out of bed. The guy feels like his whole body is killing him. Just then, looking at his hands, he notices they look kinda weird. Fenrir looks at his reflection in the window and doesn't understand where his ears and tail went, or what the heck happened. Right then, he hears Rosalind waking up, groggily trying to figure out why he's not next to her. He turns around, and they stare at each other in surprise for a few seconds. But then, quick as lightning, she leaps out of bed and snatches her cane mid-air. Rosalind hurls it at the stranger standing there, but he dodges it just in time. While the guy's distracted by the window she just shattered with her insane strength, she takes him down. She pins him, sword to his throat, and demands to know where he's hidden Fenrir. Hands up, like he's surrendering, the guy says he is Fenrir. At first, she's totally lost, but then she notices his eyes, golden just like Fenrir's. Right then, there's a knock at the door, and the butler announces Lady Eleanor's arrival. Fenrir sees his chance and tries to wrestle the sword from her grip. He shoves her off, and now he's got her pinned, trying to explain everything, but Rosalind's fighting back with everything she's got. Just as Fenrir's begging her to chill and listen, the butler and Nora walk in. The heroine imagines what she looks like in these guys' eyes, sprawled on the floor under a sheet with a totally naked dude. Trying to salvage the situation, she shoves the guy off her. Taking a closer look at the stranger, Eleanor suddenly asks if he's Fenrir. Everyone freezes in surprise, and Rosalind suddenly remembers something. A slave only comes of age when he finds his soulmate. After a while, calmed down and dressed, the heroine sits in the living room while Nora examines Fenrir on the couch next to her. While the doctor confirms there aren't any physical problems and the fever's gone, the guy keeps staring at Rosalind. Feeling awkward about the heavy silence in the room, Nora figures she should probably head out, but the heroine asks her to stay because they need to talk about something. Leaving Fenrir in the living room, Rosalind walks out of the room, and Eleanor follows her. Walking into the office, the heroine asks her friend how this could even happen, but she's still in shock herself. The girl still doubts if it's really Fenrir, but Nora thinks he's already answered all the questions. Eleanor's trying to get through to Rosalind that if he was an imposter, he couldn't have copied all the scars on his back. According to her, even though things have taken a crazy turn, her friend isn't responsible for what happened. Looking at her friend, the heroine asks how she can even say that. Eleanor reminds her that Fenrir didn't ask for her consent. He just fell for her, plain and simple. Rosalind says that after Lucian confessed his feelings, this is the second time in her life she's heard something so messed up. When Nora asks if she hates being loved that much, the girl begs her to stop. Because until yesterday, Fenrir was a kid, but her friend reminds her that he only looked that way. Nora repeats again that she's not responsible. The ears and tail are gone, and now he's just like anyone else. Besides, judging by how he handled Rosalind this morning, he's got some serious strength. No one's gonna try to snatch him. The heroine doesn't recognize her friend, but she explains she used to have to choose between saving a kid and her own comfort. But now the situation's totally different, and Rosalind herself said that a woman only makes things worse by being with a man out of pity. Thinking back to this morning, the heroine's still trying to blame Fenrir's, growth spurt on something else. According to Nora, even though it's super rare, sometimes Karen tribe slaves would mature when they were staring death in the face. They'd suddenly grow up before meeting their soulmate because self-preservation comes first. Rosalind likes this version, where it happened to Fenrir because he was worn out from wandering around forever. She jumps up shocked. Where did Nora get the idea of love and fever when Fenrir was totally freaked out by that kidnapping attempt? Eleanor suggests her friend just ask the guy himself, then she'll know for sure. The heroine grabs her head, worried she's ruined that kid's life. Rosalind wants the butler to call a tailor to get Fenrir's new measurements and to give him a couple of ready-made suits. She also wants someone sent to the cane shop to cover the damages. Rosalind says don't forget to pay for the cane she accidentally took from there too. Our girl walks into the dining room, where Fenrir's already at the table, deciding not to avoid the guy she's living with. She sits down, suggests they start dinner, and they both pick up their silverware. The room's dead silent, and even the scraping of the silverware on the plates is getting on Rosalind's nerves. Remembering what Fenrir used to be like, she notices how much he's changed and how quickly he's learning. Rosalind looks at the guy, every hand movement of his just oozing grace. Maybe it's because the movements that were difficult with his short arms are now way easier. Realizing that, she suddenly felt like Fenrir had become so much stranger and more distant. Even if she stares right at him, she'll barely find anything that reminds her of the guy he used to be. The only things left are the brown hair, the dark skin, and those gold eyes. Her stomach twists in knots, and apologizing for finishing her meal early, she gets up from the table. But as she walks past Fenlier, head down, he